My name is Kristin Lecuyer, and we are here to share our testimony about a couple's walk through Christ. I was raised in California during the 80s by a Methodist and an atheist, and I didn't know the difference. I wasn't particularly spiritual. I lived down to a lot of expectations, and pretty much grew up in California my entire life. I had a 3-year failed marriage, and then I ended up relocating to South Dakota, where eventually I ended up meeting my husband online in a video game before this was a popular thing to do. Very technical, both of us.
Well, I'm Scott Lecuyer. I was born and raised west coast of Canada in Vancouver. My family was very much a non-practicing Catholic family. So I had no background in faith or religion, other than really to avoid it. And going through the public school system, to the contrary, if that was very much taught an evolutionary way of thinking that was directly opposed to any kind of biblical faith. So the Bible and faith and all of that stuff was just not real to me. If anything, the Bible was a book of superstitions used by small-minded people as an emotional crutch to get through their lives. It just wasn't anything real to me. And so that's kind of the state of mind I was in when I got into building computers and built my first computer and started playing online games, where I met Chris. And that's a whole story in and of itself. But we met in this game, and it started very non-committal. It was just two people talking about games, kind of hanging out. The conversations over a period of time became more friendship-based, and we started sharing things about ourselves outside of the online world and outside of the game, and started discovering, hey, we kind of like talking to this person. And that was, about 6 months or so that we were doing that?
Yeah. And
then I had the opportunity to take an extended leave from my job for, it was either 13 or 14 months. And I went and spent the time with her. Actually, I kind of skipped over one thing when we had her come up and visit me, which was, that was a big move, because that was, first off, it was our very first physical get-together. And that went well. We got along quite well. It was all very platonic at that point. And then she went back, and then there was a time when, after that, it was like, okay, there might be something more relationship here, And that's when I took the time off of work and went down and found her in South Dakota.
You're both terrified.
Yeah, both directions.
Deal. Both directions.
Yeah. I mean, here you were, absolutely pale. I mean, you're already pale, but I mean pale getting off that airplane. I was pretty convinced you expected that I wasn't going to show up. And the part that terrified me is I almost didn't, because I just couldn't get away to get out to the airport. It took a lot for me to do that. And then the other way, just also being for such a long period of time, it's like I'm leaving my life behind. But part of, maybe I wasn't thinking all the way through when I packed up my entire desktop computer, complete with modem, the old, what do they call those things? I don't even remember what they call those, the style monitor. CRT monitor, yes. And big tower, yep. And of course, I hit the border going on the Greyhound, and the busload of people, they all breezed through. Customs were like, yeah, thank you, have a good trip. And then they got to me, and it was like, why are you bringing an entire desktop computer with you?
Didn't
like,
they
what
make
are you doing?
Didn't they make you turn on the monitor? Turn it on?
Yeah, they wanted me to plug it in and set it up and turn it on so they could make sure I didn't have any inappropriate material on the computer. Fortunately, I didn't.
He was
Otherwise,
single.
I may not have crossed the border at that point. But yeah, I made it through under a lot of scrutiny and spent a year in South Dakota, partly to see if a relationship for us would work, but partly to see, as Chris had 2 kids already from that first marriage, if the kids would accept or even tolerate me.
And at this point, we still weren't in the faith. We still weren't believers in God. We did literally just nothing but what we were wanting to do or anything else. But when we look back at it from our perspective now, there is no way this would have happened. Somebody somewhere said, nope, you two are going to get together, and there's a way this is going to happen. We met utterly randomly. We met, and everything just clicked right into place and put us in a place where we would be in this relationship. And it was strong. It was strong from the very beginning. We were good friends. We had close ties. The kids accepted him right away. He was terrified. And he convinced me to move up to Canada because his job was long-term. And I was just getting out of college. We ended up getting married in Washington State, my brother's backyard. My whole family attended. His family came down.
Right around Seattle.
Yeah. His mom, I'm pretty sure, thinks he was like losing it or on mushrooms or something. Probably would have preferred it. Then we moved up to Vancouver, and nothing with my immigration went well. So I ended up moving back to the States a year later. So we were back and forth, and we spent good 3.5 years apart.
But I really think in hindsight, that 3.5 years was a blessing in disguise because, and both of us talk about this now, but one of the biggest things that we drew from that was a real appreciation of how important it is to communicate, because for a lot of time, during that whole 3.5 years, that's all we had was communication online or over the phone. And so you need to be able to articulate things and say what you feel, and because you can't see the reaction of the person. So you have to get it some other way, and you want to make sure you're conveying the right thing. But I think that has benefited us. Even we're coming up on our 22nd anniversary, that it's to this day still benefited us. We enjoy each other's company. We like talking to each other. We're just still in love.
Yeah, this was well before iPhone video chat, net meeting. We were using net meeting, for anybody old enough to remember this software, which was super spiky and partial, and we had dial-up modems, and so it was a lot of texting by typing on a computer. So it was a challenge, and I'm sure we both kind of felt pretty hopeless at some point that this wasn't going to work. And then all of a sudden it all clicked in place, and we moved up. We moved into Abbotsford because an old acquaintance of my husband's got back in touch, and they wanted to reconnect as DJ partners. We moved back into Abbotsford. I didn't care. I'm relocating countries, so let's just find a place and rent it. And we started settling into life in Abbotsford, British Columbia.
Yeah, there's a big story there because the timing of all of that is just another great indicator of God's involvement in the whole thing. Because it was in a short period of time where I was contacted by Ray, and he was interested in doing a radio show with me, but I was not anywhere nearby and didn't really have the ability to get to him. So it was like, I'm interested, but I can't do anything right now. To within a few months, Chris is up there with the kids, and we just couldn't stay where we were at and needed to move. And I'm like, let's move to Abbotsford. And that was opened up with a whole bunch of doors right there. And what's interesting to me is this was a time where our marriage was quite tumultuous. There was a few opportunities that it almost ended. And I think had we continued down a secular road, it would have ended. We just wouldn't have stuck it out. But thankfully, during the process of all of this and moving to Abbotsford, through some interactions with Ray and doing the Power Praise radio show and involvement with Christian music, that I became interested in going to church and looking into the Bible, and became a believer and found my faith and mentioned it to her, and she came along. And I think that change and that growth helped us survive what was at times a pretty rocky period in our marriage. And now, I mean, we're as rock solid could be. But and that often happens to a lot of young couples, where you get to about that 3, 4, 5 year mark, and when a lot of marriages are going to break apart, that's when it'll happen. And we had our rough patch right around the same time. But I really do think that finding faith was part of saving our marriage.
I had a lot of baggage in my prior relationships. I had a lot of baggage I was toting around, and I needed to find a way to communicate that and express it. And we came across a couple of preachers out there, and Mark Gungor made a huge impression on us.
Yeah, laugh your way to a better marriage.
Yeah.
If you've never seen that and are having any kind of relationship problems, I cannot recommend that one enough. It is unbelievably insightful and incredibly entertaining. You will be laughing so hard, you'll be crying, and you'll be learning something at the same time.
And it's all biblical based. So we got pretty heavy into a Pentecostal church, up to studies and being baptized into the PAOC. And we wanted more. So we were the newfound Christians who were hungry for more guidance, more detail, more information, more. We just wanted more. So we were attending Bible studies that were recommended, that were people from the same Bible, and they'd recommend we read this commentary on the Bible and this commentary on the Bible, but nobody ever actually said, sit down and read the Bible. And neither of us had ever done that, really, not end to end. So I had a period of time when I was 19 out in Boston with a discipleship church. It didn't end well for me because my temperament wasn't there, my mindset wasn't there, my devotion wasn't there, my understanding wasn't there, and there was not really anybody trying to help me completely understand. And I keep remembering the biggest thing is that the Bible his word is so simple that a 4-year-old, a child, could understand it. That this is not supposed to be burdensome or complicated. It's supposed to go right to your heart and stick there. And when it does, he follows because you're just there. And so during that period, it didn't work. So when we started going back to church, I do know that people around me noticed my change in things that I'd say, my language, things that I'd be willing to go out and do, hang out, watch on TV or otherwise. My vocabulary improved immensely, a lot less French, and a lot of the 80s things that I was used to doing, I just tucked away, and I said, you know what, that's my past, not my future, and we're going to go from here. And I really felt like I was starting to grow and mature into a different person. And we still wanted more. We weren't getting enough. We wanted more detail. So we went to our pastor and we said, we've been hearing all this stuff about, the Hebrew roots movements, going back to basics in the Bible. And he turned us down. And he wasn't interested in hearing about it. And he wasn't interested in guiding us through the studies. And that was disappointing, to be literally cold-shouldered by the person who's supposed to be shepherding you through the Bible, through the Word of God, because he didn't want to learn anything. He thought it was all mumbo jumbo. So this really kind of stuck in our craw, but it didn't stop us wanting to hear more.
And it really wasn't about us, trying to change his opinion or how he viewed things, but just to have him help us to understand things better. And he wasn't interested in doing that. So I did the next best thing I could think of, and that was turn to the internet and see if I could find some information there, because I couldn't find anyone in person. And I came across one gentleman by the name of Brad Scott, who is just an amazing person, and feel so blessed that I had the opportunity to actually meet him and his wife, which Chris got a chance to hang out with his wife. That was I learned how to make tzitzit. But they were fascinating people, and he was very much one about taking things back to the mountaintop meaning, right? Getting through the muddiness of stuff and just getting back to the simple definition of the word, and let the Bible interpret the Bible, and you don't need all these extra commentaries and everything else. And so that was a great start. And then so I kind of make a shift at this point from sort of traditional Western Christianity more to a Hebrew roots or Messianic movement. And I've already approached Chris with, hey, how do you feel about going to church? And she surprised me by being agreeable with that, to say, hey, how do you feel about we stop going to church? And we started looking at this stuff. And, she was very busy just being a mother and taking care of things. And it's like, she trusted me enough to follow me along on the journey. But I was bringing a lot of material and said, you need to watch this video. You need to catch this little article or whatever. And it's like, yeah. But a lot of it didn't happen until we encountered another fella named Michael Rood, who was a Marine. And I figured, okay, if I can get her on anything, it's going to be this one, because her dad was a Marine. And it's like, once you're a Marine, you're always a Marine. And if you're a Marine family, you're a Marine, There's a connection. There's a bond there. And that's when she sat down and listened to it and kind of came to the same conclusion as a lot of the questions we had that weren't getting answered in our Pentecostal church were suddenly being answered and totally made sense and lined up with everything we were reading in the Bible.
Actually was the Bible.
Yeah.
So we weren't referred by all these different teachers, and there's many of them, okay? We weren't referred to this commentary, that commentary. We were referred to this book, that book. Go to John, go to Genesis, go to Exodus, start reading, and then you can go down different rabbit holes. It is so easy, what version, what language, what thing, to get so hooked up on one little thing. So we also came to a real good conclusion that we're dumb and we don't get it all. And there's a lot in that Bible that are said that makes no sense to us, especially in English, that someday we'll know the answer. And we just have to trust a couple of really basic things. And one is, God is real. He is true. And he doesn't change. And if that is all true, and we accept the Bible as his fully inspired word, not some daydream, not some gossip, not fictional allegories, but if that Bible is true, then we need to know that Bible end to end as best we can, so that we stand in front of him and said, you know what, we inherited lies, but Lord, we tried. We have the heart of David. We're coming to you. Give us the guidance. And that's when we started praying for guidance. As a couple, without the family, we started reading together. You read to me. Yeah. You're better at it.
But that's it. I mean, it's really a matter of the heart. And one of the philosophies that we really follow is this idea of do the best you can with what you have. We all have some of it right. We all have some of it wrong. But do the best you can with what you have. Follow your heart and just keep God as your focal point. And whatever mistakes you make, if you make a mistake, that's not the problem. I always said, if you know something is wrong, if you know, we shouldn't be doing this, and then you deliberately go and do it, it's not about making a mistake. That's an act of rebellion. Now you're talking about something different. And if you know that it's wrong and choose to do it anyways, now you've got an issue. But if you don't know, if you don't have all the information, if you're still trying to figure things, we're little children. We're the children of God. Not once in Scripture does it ever say we're the adults of God. We're the children of God. I mean, we're always on this learning path. And I think that's one of the key points for me, is to take a book that I never believed in, and I believe in it now, and just learn it as good as I can.
In realizing that we had, really coasted into this faith and we were reading the Bible and everything, when it came time for us to argue, because when you're in a relationship, it happens, period. The meanest arguments never included God. And the arguments that actually succeeded in achieving a good purpose, in other words, something in our relationship shifted and became better, are usually the ones where we went back to what the Bible says about relationships. And there's a lot of relationship advice in the Bible itself. There's tons of stuff in there. And it's not what people think. I am not June Cleaver. I am not meek and mild. I can get witnesses and testimony to that fact. But I trust my husband to guide our family in a positive way. So when we look back now, we go, well, right then, something dramatic in our lives happened and we made a different decision than we probably would have. And so now we're like, okay, well, we met, then we got together, then we got married, then we moved to Canada, then we moved to Abbotsford, and right there, that's a game changer. Completely shifted our lives entirely, because you got involved in the 80s show. So you got back involved in music and doing the DJ. Then you got involved in a Christian show. Then you pulled us into church. All your fault. Then we got through this, and we ended up with a really great friendship. Ray and I did not hit it off at all until maybe 5 years into our faith walk. And he and I were able to come to a friendship. And I knew his kids. We watched them grow up. And so one day we found out his youngest daughter was having a child. And we showed up at the hospital, and we ended up having 2 foster children over the next couple of years.
You were actually there when she gave birth, weren't you?
Just shortly thereafter, I showed up with a balloon and a bear, and I met a social worker. It was really disconcerting. But if I hadn't been there, we wouldn't have the journey we have right now, which is getting a chance to raise 2 amazing children in His will, teaching them that God has a purpose and a plan, and He will protect us and guide us and take us to the things that He has promised us, lands of milk and honey.
Yep.
And we can literally see at this moment is when God said, "This is what I've got for you."
And that, it's the whole thing of just seeing. At the time, of course, you don't see any of this, but in hindsight, we look back and we can see how all of these things, these moments occurred that led to a particular result. And I recently did another video with Ray where we actually talked about our history together and all the little pieces that led up to everything in there. So that's a good one as well. It kind of tells the other side of it from this equation. But that connected to us. And I don't think without our faith that we found, I don't think we'd still be together. And even if we were together, I don't think we'd have these 2 girls. And even if we did have these 2 girls, I don't think they'd be getting raised well. So God and our faith has brought us through this entire journey. And there's instances we can talk about where, it was like physically obvious indicators that something was going on. But all of these things led up on both sides, and all of these pieces in different directions. It's like an orchestra being played out and put together that led up to where we're at now. And I got to give one example, because it just was from the time we moved to Abbotsford, both of us, both Chris and I, were like, I don't really want to live in Abbotsford. Like, it doesn't feel like home to us. we knew people there. We had good relationships. It wasn't all bad. And I had this opportunity to do all this stuff with Ray and the shows and to grow and find my faith. So, I mean, that's absolutely one fantastic thing about being in Abbotsford. But there was this niggling thing in the back of both of our minds that doesn't feel like home to us. And so we got to thinking about it at one point, before the girls were actually part of the equation. It's like, maybe we should move. Like, can we figure out, if we're not supposed to be here, where is it that we're supposed to be? And a bunch of circumstances happened with that one too, but it kind of led us to thinking about Vancouver Island. So we sat on that for a while. We didn't do anything about it. And then I found out several members of my family, out of nowhere, moved to Vancouver Island. And I'm like, well, I want to spend more time with some of my family like this. So it's like, okay, well, maybe that's a trigger to do this. But by this point, we did have the girls. However, by all the contracts that we were going with, dealing with the children's ministry and everything else, we couldn't do anything with them. We couldn't go anywhere. So we had to stay in Abbotsford until really everything played out. In the meantime, I'd put a transfer in at my job to go to Vancouver Island, just because it could sit there for a while. It could be years before anything actually comes out of that. To make a long story as short as possible, within 48 hours, within 2 days, we finalized the paperwork that made us guardians of Autumn and Abigail, which allowed us to be able to move. I got my transfer to Vancouver Island, and within 2 days, in the midst of a housing crisis, found a place for my entire family to live on Vancouver Island. This is all within a week.
And the timing put it to where I was finishing up tax season, so I had a month left. So he went ahead, and he was able to live with his dad.
And we had an unexpected source of income drop in our laps, so we could afford to do it.
So it was just boom, boom, boom. Okay, I guess this is the move we need to make. So it was a real wrench. We had to talk to the family of the girls and everybody, and we really did determine this was going to be the better move. So we relocated. It was really rough at the beginning, but then following through with watching, things fall into our lap, we wanted to purchase something, and we wanted to buy a house somewhere. We wanted to not live where we were at the moment because it wasn't really well suited. My job that I had when I came over here shifted, and I walked in and I got another job within a few weeks. And then in 2018, my brother passed away, and we ended up getting part of his estate. And towards the end of 2019, we were looking at property thinking, well, are we ready to pull the trigger? And we were still kind of hemming and hawing because there was still so many things in play. And literally a property that we'd been looking at went off the market, came back on the market.
It was too expensive for us.
Yeah.
But we liked the property. And we had looked at it a little previously, went off the market because the listing had been on too long. They put it back on the market.
Almost $100,000 less.
At a significantly reduced price where all of a sudden now we could afford it.
Then we went through, at the beginning of tax season again, and here I'd taken over management of an office. So I'm doing a house purchase, a rushed house purchase, so 3 weeks, doing all the inspections, doing all the emails, doing all the paperwork by email because I'm also prepping an office for tax season. Got the financing, got everything set to go, got the house, moved into the house. We got the keys on February 15th, 2020. We moved into the house February 25th, 2020. The quarantine started 2 days later, or 2 weeks later.
Yeah.
So we had a half acre.
So we got
the kids
the house,
could run around
a half acre backyard and a playground.
In time for us to go into quarantine, so we had 2 weeks to unpack.
Yeah.
And it was just, if this hadn't happened, then this wouldn't have happened, then this wouldn't have happened. And the house that we're in is a great opportunity. It helped us throughout the whole pandemic. and my husband had to take leave without pay. So for 6.5 months, we were living off of a lot of hope and prayer. But for some reason, every time we turned around, money would show up. And I'm not joking. I'm a U.S. citizen. My two oldest children are U.S. citizens. And we would start getting these stipends from the States. It would show up in time to pay a bill. And when you were put on leave without pay, you got an accidental paycheck.
Yep.
It was like 2.5 months worth of pay, and we in one check, and it was an accident because he'd been on medical leave. And it was like, oh, so we didn't have to, we were able to spend that time and pray about it and say, we're going to stay in God's word. We don't believe we're supposed to take these things.
Obviously, as a lot of people were, they were under intense pressure, particularly in Canada. That's one of a bad place for that, where everyone was really put under heavy pressure in order to function, in order to travel, in order to keep your job. And we really had to consider, do we yield on what we believe? Do we backtrack on that and just go ahead and take this thing so that we can keep making money? Or do we adhere to what it is we believe? Kind of what I was saying about if you believe something and then willfully act against it. You know, so it's like, do we concede on that, or do we hold true to it? And we're like, nope, we have got to hold true to this. This is what we believe. We have faith in God. If this is right, He will provide for us. He will help us through this. And boy, did He.
Yeah, I ended up getting moved to a salary much higher than what I was earning. I work in a small office. I'm the manager there, and the owners of the company were like, meh, okay. And when Scott went on leave without pay, he got to focus on the kids, working with them for homework, and he's a great house husband, does dishes.
And laundry.
And if this wasn't the hand of God, I really don't know what is, because just as he was coming to the end of his 14-day leave, or his 14 days notice, where he would be leaving this job forever, the federal health regulations altered, and a supervisor called him and said, hey, coming back? And he's like, I gave notice.
Now, it's important to know that with my particular job, when you do notice of that nature, it is a non-reversible process. So once you end your employment is ended. You don't just turn around and say, I changed my mind. You don't have that option.
So the supervisor called him and said, well, we need you. We can't afford to be without you. We need you. You held many positions and really well trained. You've been there for 25 years. And they're still trying to get you back. Yeah. So he said, hang on a second. Let me call HR. And so that supervisor, who wasn't even truly his direct supervisor, called HR and said, what's going on with this? And they said, oh, we're doing da-da-da. And he actually got the whole thing reversed as if it had never been uttered. So Scott was able to go back to work and kept his job of 25 years and kept his pension intact and walked back in. We didn't lose medical. We didn't lose seniority. Nothing. He went back to work.
Yep.
We don't know how it happened. We thank God for it every day, because you are 5 years from retirement, I think, 4.5 years from retirement, with a full pension, right about the time that the girls will be going into high school, which is when they need the most monitoring. So, it's been pretty extreme, and every once in a while we'll look at each other and we're like, wow, that really just happened, and not realizing that by turning to God for those answers, we're getting answers. Now it's
we hit our knees in some thankful prayer when that reversal was granted for my letter of resignation. And they said, yeah, you got your job back. Because by any stretch, that shouldn't have occurred.
It was on
And
your
in
last
fact,
day. Yeah.
I had spoken to several people to say, okay, there's some extenuating circumstances here. Is there anything we can do about this? Because this isn't a normal letter of retirement. And all they kept coming back saying was, no, there's nothing we can do. It's out of our hands. Nothing we can do. Nothing we can do. And this one supervisor, someone I developed a pretty good relationship with a single phone call, was able to get it reversed.
Unbelievably. I mean, just floored. So God doesn't always answer with a booming voice and flaming bushes. But he answers if you pay attention. Sometimes the answer is no. Sometimes the answer is, I've already told you this. You should have listened the first time. Because we will find ourselves up against something and we're just like, we don't know what to do. And then all of a sudden we'll turn around and it's like, oh yeah, we should have done it this way in the first place. And we learn a lesson from that. So what we have found in our relationship, well, first of all, changing my perspective. One of the biggest things that I feel I lacked growing up was a purpose and a dedication. I was kind of floating around very hollow, and I did a lot of things growing up and in my life and my relationship that were really wild and very much designed to hurt myself because I didn't care about myself. I wasn't special. I wasn't super at anything. And yet, since coming to faith, I have realized that I am unique. I am special. I am loved down to the very hairs on my head by somebody who never fails me.
And you are here for a reason.
And I have reasons and purposes. And although it is astounding to me that at the age of 45 we could take on 2 children, we did. It wasn't supposed to be permanent. But in looking back, there's been a tragedy, and so now it is permanent. Their mom is not able to step back in. I am grateful that I've been there from the beginning and that the children have the ability to grow up, be children, and learn about their families, because we're still in touch with everybody. We have all the ifs in the world, and we keep going back to, I'm grateful it happened this way, and we're grateful it happened that way. And when we struggle between us, quite often we argue on the same side of an argument because one of us didn't actually say it the right way or the way the other.
We're making the same point. We just say it differently, and then
then we're like, oh, just take it back.
Hey, wait a minute. Are we actually saying the same thing? Yeah,
we are. But we take it back to the Bible. Well, what does the Bible say about this issue? What does the Bible say about this? And it's funny because I've had people say about me specifically, about my personality, about who I am not shy and retiring. I am quite a forceful personality. And yet I defer to Scott. And the reason I defer to Scott is he has the heart for God. He has the research and the study, and he has an understanding of the Word that is super clear to me. And when he explains something to me, it's like a light bulb goes off. And yet I do more of the tending of the home, not because I am June Cleaver, but because that's more where my ministry is. I take care of the kids. I'm going to keep them alive to 19 if it kills me. You know, I have my son, my eldest is special needs. I have, other extended family members that we reach out to, and we try and project our choices, our life, and our God so that we are a light to other people while still keeping God in our home and our decisions.
Yeah, I find myself wondering many times why God saw fit to open my eyes to the truth of His Word and to the truth of Him, because it certainly was not through my own incredible intellect that I realized any of this. And I know and I trust that there was a reason for it. And I think the biggest part of that reason is my wife and these kids and our 2 other kids from her first marriage, my family. And I wouldn't be the person that I am today without God and without my faith and without my belief in the Bible. So, as I say in all of the videos that I put up on Truth and Testimony, to me, the single best thing you can do is keep yourself steeped in that word, because it is life to you and prosperity.
And guidance.
Not
and
that kind
wisdom.
of prosperity.
It could be. He will
It could
prosper
be.
you. You don't know what's going to happen, but kneeling and praying for money to fall from the sky isn't how you're going to get there.
Talking more spiritual prosperity.
There is so much more to living a life in the will of God and to living a marriage dedicated to God. And we can't just sit down and do it in one recording. It doesn't work. But if people had questions, that might help. That we would definitely be willing to answer questions of a biblical nature.
That's part of what we're here for. That's part of what Ray and Sean and I are all here for. And we always encourage people that if you have any comments or if you have any questions about how to make a marriage work, I mean, we can give you our advice and our examples of what worked for us. But we're always happy to hear that stuff and interact with people. You can get in touch with us at truthandtestimony@gmail.com. Or leave a comment below. We do try to look at those as often as we can. And after 22 years, you're still my best friend.
Happy anniversary.
Yeah.